We live. What's up, everybody? How we doing? What's up, everyone? Welcome to the YouTube Live Monday, October 21st. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I was just here on a Friday, and now we're back here, and it is Monday. If you guys are tuning in, let me know what's up. Give me hello. Say hello, Jamie. How you doing? Where are you tuning in from, you guys? Love to hear where we're tuning in from. Where are we consuming this live from? If you guys are watching this live, I would love to hear where you're tuning in from. If you're watching the replay, no need to do a damn thing except just watch the video. Your bed, yes, you got the exhaustion going on, Robin. Do you? Are you exhausted? I have been sleeping like crazy. Yes, exhaustion, absolute crazy levels of exhaustion. That's kind of what my weekend was like. It was very a lot of sleep, a lot of just rest, a lot of doing nothing. Still a lot of feelings of really being super tired, oversleeping in the AM and needing to nap in the day. Yes, isn't it crazy the level of exhaustion right now that we're just noticing? We're just trying to move so much energy through. So I am totally on the same wavelength with the exhaustion. As you guys notice, I'm sitting today. My neighbor's bedroom is right close to where I do these from. And when I stand up, I just build way too much energy. And so I have to sit down just so I can keep my volume control. Even though I like standing, but I think I just got to find like a different space in the future where I can just fucking go off, just go off into that energy. Need a fucking just a big cathedral with just instead of stained glass, olden day pictures, big just dicks, big just rainbow dicks, on the top of the, stained glass steel, instead of it's religious images, just people getting just fucking just orgies and just big, bright rainbow dicks. I think that's exactly what my church would have in it. You know what I mean? Yeah, just some fucking I'm obsessed with miniature donkeys too. I love donkeys. I love miniature donkeys, just with their feet, their little legs and their little hooves, they're just useless. Their little hooves are just dragging so close to the ground. I love miniature donkeys, but yes, we need like a dirty cathedral. I mean, some type of just fucking just come the fuck alive space. So that's in the future, but not right now. So that's why I'm sitting. But yeah, so guys, we're dealing with some exhaustion. What else is everyone dealing with here? If you guys are watching this live, let me know what you're dealing with physically, mentally, emotionally. We got Robin feeling exhausted, which I've been feeling a lot of the same. How else are we feeling, guys, if you guys are watching this live? Hudson Valley, New York, too. Lots of energy. Steven, there you go, buddy. Love it. Lots of energy. What are you doing with that energy? Lots of energy. What are you doing with that energy? Moving into creative projects or what? Yes, guys, we're trying to access a lot of energy. Okay, you guys. So this transmission was going to, it's funny because I've had people, Robin actually tell me that staying up late and creating. There we go, Steven. Get on it. Get on the horse, buddy. Robin told me that these have been a good way to describe them is energetic weather reports, which is very, very accurate because we do these so often. It's okay, what's the weather like on Monday? And then what's the weather like on Friday? It's so funny. Do you guys find on the news, the people who report the news, do you think they get so fucking turned on if there's a hurricane coming? It's bad because it's going to cause mass destruction and people have to evacuate their homes. But do you think fucking old Pete there who does sort of the weather forecasting, he's oh, we got a hurricane, who's going to name it? And he just gets so jacked up. It's Christmas Day for him because he's finally I get to do something. You know what I mean? Finally I get and he gets all jacked up because a hurricane's coming. I wonder if that's the case. Well, anyways, this is kind of energetic weather reports that I'm giving. And I feel lately with what's been happening, it's kind of the if there was a Hurricane Milton coming through, that would be the equivalent, just with all the the crazy stuff that's happening just in sort of the energetic field. And so energetic weather reports. It's kind of like, yeah, Jamie, what's the cosmic weather like? Well, we got some lightning bolts, we got some fucking just real stuck, brutal ancestral energy from the fifth dimension. What do we have, Jamie? So maybe I'd just be an energetic weather person. Maybe that's a bit. Maybe we can get it. But yeah, so I was going to talk. The entry point to what I'm going to talk about today is actually going to be death and grief. Because I don't know if you guys are noticing, there's a massive death vibe going on right now. If you notice, like, and again, so much of just what happens is that it's about where do we draw attention to? What are we applying meaning to? And so, for example, if we're drawing to death, it's probably because there's some type of unconscious death that's happening. If we notice and we're aware that death is happening, then we really notice there's some type of unconscious or subconscious death that's happening. But really, on a very actual external level, I am noticing death all around me. And I've had just a lot of almost processing my relationship to death. And so that was sort of going to be the entry point of this video. And then also how grief sort of works in that process. I have no idea where this is going to go, but I wanted to start off. And so I guess just for anyone watching, are you, if you guys are listening, are you guys noticing a death experience happening where maybe just, a little more common than normal? You just are hearing people are dying, someone's unwell. Obviously there was like Liam Payne, former One Direction singer. There was also I probably had 10 people around me just say that someone they knew or they just had some unexpected news that someone passed. And I'm just like seeing these, oh my God, like this person had this happen to them. This person had that. And so again, to bring it back, you guys, whenever we're just noticing that there is a lot of death around us, our subconscious or unconscious is basically trying to tune into a death-like process or within us. And the place that I found really interesting is we got some family news. Your content has been so validated. My body is feeling all this, and you've really brought words to my experiences lately. Thank you. Well, Courtney, you're so welcome. It's my pleasure. I'm so happy that it's useful and helpful. That means a lot. And so in the past couple of weeks, in my sort of personal realm, we found out that my uncle, my mom's brother, is really unwell and basically dying. And so this kind of news comes in. And so my mom and I are like, yes, let's go out east because my uncle's in Ottawa and he's doing all these different testings. And we want to go out there because we basically don't know when he's going to go. We don't know when he's going to pass. And he won't let us come out and see him. Partly because he's doing all these testings and he's going through this process, but also just what I'm really tuning into. And this is where, when people are going or people are transitioning to the other side, they don't want to be a burden. They don't want people to see them when they're quote unquote in a state of weakness or vulnerability. And so what I'm really tuning into, and it's crazy, you guys, because 6 months ago, out of nowhere, before we even knew my uncle was unwell, I had a dream and I woke up and I was like, my uncle is dying. This was before we even knew he's unwell. And I told my mom that we have to go visit him. And so I've just been tuning into some crazy sort of like psychicness that I hadn't even tapped in before. But this was like 6 months ago. And then sure enough, in the last couple of weeks that we found out my uncle, he has congestive heart failure and he has leukemia and he's in his mid 70s and he's like not a very healthy guy. And but he won't allow us to come see him. Right. And he's always really a guy that, and this is not going to be about my uncle, but I'm going to jump off from here. And he's always been a guy that's really, he hermited himself. He isolated himself a lot, really, really bad at getting in touch and getting in contact. Really, really bad. Like he won't respond to your messages. He won't respond to your email. Very much just like separates himself. Right. And the really wild thing, you guys, about my uncle was he was my first ever life coach. So he was the head and president of the Waldorf schools. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Waldorf schools. He was president and head of the Waldorf schools in Canada. And crazy smart guy, spoke 6 different languages, like an insane brain, right? And he was my first ever life coach when I was 24. I had just gotten back from living abroad in Australia, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. At the time, I was thinking about moving to New York and going to acting school. I was just kind of getting into writing, and we did it over. It wasn't Zoom. I think it was like Google Chats at the time. And he was my first ever life coach, and he took me through a bunch of these processes. He was my first and only ever life coach. And he took me through some, basic sort of processes. It wasn't at all what I know the industry to be now, but it just felt like a full circle moment because he's kind of transitioning now. And he was my first ever life coach. And so I really wanted to be able to see him and kind of just like let him know where I've kind of come to in this space, and just let him know that the origins and sort of my inception in this space was kind of birthed through working with him. But now he won't allow my mom and I to go back and see him. And the reason why I want to bring this up, you guys, is we leave the world often very similar to the way that we enter the world, right? It's real fucking Benjamin Button shit, where it kind of becomes a complete, we come back to the start. And when I say that, we leave the world often very hopeless, very vulnerable, very much like we were in some inception of when we were a baby, right? That we, can't take care of ourselves, that we're really, really vulnerable. We're really, really sort of exposed to the world. We're really, really exposed to the world, right? We can't fend for ourselves, and a lot of times what happens is it becomes this call to a level of humility and grace, right? Things like shame and pride. Obviously, I've never transitioned to the other side, but I feel that so much of dying in a way becomes of how people get to leave, because you leave people behind. And so in a way, I feel like when you transition, so much of it becomes about what are the people around you going to need to be complete for you to transition. And it becomes Ram Dass talked about this when Ram Dass had his stroke. I don't know if you guys are Ram Dass fans, and he has a really cool documentary I watched years ago on Netflix. And it basically he had his stroke, and he was talking to his spiritual mentor, or his one of his teachers, and they were talking about what this stroke was going to bring him, what he was going to get, what he was going to learn from this stroke. And what is I don't know if Ram Dass came up with this or his spiritual teacher, but he said, what you're going to learn from this is grace, right? Think about it. You are in a wheelchair. He would go swimming every day, and he'd have to have a caregiver to come help him into the pool. He wasn't able to function fully. You know what I mean? Sometimes we don't fully recover from a stroke, particularly if we have a stroke a lot later in life. And so he basically became handicapped, right? Wasn't able to teach in the way that he was, and he's living in Hawaii. And he just talks about that grace, that almost his mortality and the confrontation with his mortality brought him to a space of having to learn grace. How can I learn to be graceful? Right. And I did another video about grace, but so much to me of grace is really, guys, how do we confront pain? How do we confront our pain and essentially be able to be with the pain within us, to not hurt other people, to be able to let other people in, to not get bitter and angry with the way that we orient with the world. And so being confronted with his own mortality, and in the moment his own mortality was functioning and being able to walk and do the things that he wasn't able to do before. And in that, he turned to grace. Really, also what I think of that is that we're learning to be more humble, move into a space of more humility. How can I be more graceful with myself? How can I be more graceful with other people? How, in this experience and this process, can I use this to move deeper into myself? And so when we're confronted with death to some degree, we have to deal with our own mortality, you guys. And so much of that is going to reveal our relationship to our grief, our relationship to our vulnerability, our relationship to our shame, our relationship to allow other people to see us not in our strongest moments. And so often, and this is how I relate to this to my uncle, that in this moment where, you know, there's an opportunity to move into grace, and I don't really know what his experience is, but I just have this feeling he doesn't want anyone to see him in this space, which is what it's really doing, guys. It's actually, and I was cluing into this, I was getting the download. It's revealing so much ancestral trauma just in the men in my lineage. You know, because I understand that part of not wanting to be seen when you're transitioning to the other side. You're not wanting to be seen when you're helpless and you can't take care of yourself. You're not able to move into grace. You're not able to move into grace. I get that because I used to be that type of person. I used to be that type of person where I couldn't reveal that much vulnerability within myself. I used to be that person because I couldn't grieve. I couldn't allow myself to grieve. I couldn't allow myself to grieve. But when you allow yourself to grieve and you go there and you go all the way to that grief, you get to complete something. You get to complete something. What happens, guys, when death comes, whether spiritual death or actual death with someone around you, wherever there's just a level of mortality. And a spiritual path, the spiritual process is the constant questioning and confrontation of your own mortality, whether that mortality is patterns, habits, identities, masks. In a spiritual path, we're constantly confronting our own mortality to become a greater embodiment of grace, which can really feel like divinity, which is allow life. And Hemingway always said this, that life will break everyone, and for those who it doesn't break, it kills. So let's hope that life breaks us. Let's hope that life breaks us. And when we allow life to break us, when we allow the confrontation of our own mortality to move to a deeper embodiment of grace, that's when we go back to the start. And this is where it can have a full circle, guys, where death actually leads to birth. I always have this theory that God are babies, right? If you think about a baby, just don't think about the physical baby, but think about the essence and aura of a young child. The curiosity, the creativity, the constant enamorment with everything, the radiance and the light and the purity of spirit. And then what happens is we get hurt by life. We go on through our life and we get hurt by life. We get hurt by life. We get hurt by life. We get bitter. We get resentful. When we get scared, Somewhere along the way, we lose courage. Somewhere along the way, we lose courage. And then what happens, you guys, is through our life, we're constantly confronted with many death experiences, many initiations. And we're not able to confront our mortality in those moments. We're not able to confront our mortality in those moments. And what happens, you guys, is those build up scars that never really heal, right? They build up these sort of open sort of wounds that slowly over time become infected. And they become infected, and we build up this mass and this magnitude of scars. This is so much where the emotional birth of illness and disease comes from. Obviously, there's environmental factors, there's genetic factors, there's lifestyle factors, but there's a massive trauma, emotional implication with all disease, with all illness. And so those scars build up in time, and they become infected. And it's because we weren't able to confront the mortality in that moment. And I think about my uncle right now. His brother, my mom's twin brother, said he won't go to see him, I don't even think he's going to call him. And it's because there's stuff that he's holding onto from the past. And when someone passes or someone transitions, it gives us an opportunity to fully confront mortality. And oftentimes, why we don't go to the heart of it is because we're afraid to have the revelation of our own mortality to be felt within us. We're afraid to confront the fear within us, the fear that maybe one day that we're going to go. We're afraid to feel the pain, the pain of maybe longing of what that connection was, and we weren't able to create that connection. We might feel the anger and the resentment, or we might feel all of this worry as we just see this person so vulnerable right there. And so in that moment, it's actually not even about their mortality. It's about what it elicits and what it activates in us. And this happens generationally, where people don't really confront mortality and they don't confront death. So we never really actually begin again. We never move back to the essence of that young child or that baby. We never get to resume or regain some innocence that we lost. And those scars just build up and build up because we weren't able to be courageous enough. We weren't able to be courageous enough to go to the heart, to go to the heart of that confrontation, of that conflict. And so much of what it really is are you able to emotionally feel? Can you feel everything that comes with those emotions? Can you feel everything in that level of vulnerability? What's your capacity like in those moments? Because this is why people end up suffering, you guys, their entire life. Because there's so many incomplete moments of death and confrontation of mortality that never truly create a birth. You guys understand that? And so we go on, and we age before our time. We develop disease and illness because we can't complete things. And death is a real opportunity for completion. It's a real opportunity for completion. Whether it's an actual death that's happening or it's more of a spiritual death right now. I feel there's both that's happening. People are passing on and transitioning because it's their time, because we're at this real crossroads and this real portal opening moment, but it's trying to reveal a spiritual death within us. Are we able to fully transmute the grief all the way through to regain the innocence? Because we're afraid that we're going to get lost out at sea, you guys. We're afraid that the storms are going to capsize us. We're afraid that we're never going to get out to the other side. We're afraid that if we fully submit to the grief and we fully go all the way there, that it's going to swallow us, that it's going to eat us whole, that there's going to be so much grief that we're not going to know what to do with it, that we're not going to be able to handle it. And so this is where we hang out the perimeter of our life, you guys. We tiptoe around the edges. We don't go and see the sick and dying and tell them that we love them. We even avoid the fact that they're dying. Let's not talk about that. But no, this is an opportunity. You have to go right to the heart of it. Allow the moment to bring you grace. Allow the moment to bring you grace. So much of when you transition, it's what I feel. It's about the people you leave behind and the level of completion that you can give to them and the opportunity that while something is dying, it's going back into the earth. It's giving an opportunity for some new flower to arise. Because always when we die, that we move back and we move back to the earth and we become part of the ecosystem in a different way. And there's a new type of light that can shine from that experience. There's a new depth of wisdom. What really happens, you guys, there's a new level of grace and humility. There's a new level of vulnerability and heart connection. I don't know if you guys feel this right now, but through this death process, that people are trying to really cleanse the palate of the heart chakra. They're really, really trying to cleanse the palate of the heart chakra, which means that we're trying to cleanse all the holdings, all the incompletions in the body. Everywhere that we're incomplete in the body, we're trying to complete it. We're trying to complete it. And when you complete it, you'll notice because the energy descends. When you complete energetically, when you complete something energetically, energy moves out your legs and back into the earth. It's this flushing process of life's ecosystem that now moves back into the earth so something else can birth from that. Really what happens is something bursts that we're regaining, a new level of that childlike divinity that we lost, that we're trying to get back to. That's the great tragedy, you guys. We spend our whole lives growing up trying to find a way to get back to the youth that we feel that we lost, or the purity of spirit that came with youth. And so much of it is when we're confronted with mortality. We can't let that moment make us humble and graceful. And so what happens is we live a life of regret. We never get back to the start. How we complete things, you guys, is how we start things. And we spend our whole life trying to have the greatest rising and birth of our life, but we're too afraid to complete something. And so we never really get the birth on the other side. We never really get it. We get a little bit of it, but we tiptoed around it. We tiptoed around it. We didn't go to the heart of it. And so, for example, in my uncle's case, when someone's passing to the other side, it becomes an invaluable opportunity to regain some purity of spirit, to allow the core to be completed, to allow something to move back into the earth. You're respecting the cycle of life, and you're totally surrendering to the reality of what's in front of you. And you're allowing your emotions to fully transmute. And you guys will notice this. Shit will be moving in your body when you really complete it. That's what's happening right now. Our bodies are trying to complete things. We're trying to regain a new level of vibration from the youth that we lost, from that childlike quality. We're trying to move things into the earth so something can come. And you guys know what comes on the other side of that? There's so much energy that comes through our body. This is where the primal fever and ferocity comes through your body. This is actually where sacred rage comes from. Doesn't it feel counterintuitive? Sacred rage comes from your capacity to process ancestral grief through your body. Through your capacity to process all the pain of your ancestors through your body, you get birth, that innate life force quality that no one could ever find. This is what happens in these initiations, you guys. When you fully go to the heart of that ancestral grief, there's a new level of sacred life force energy that comes. There's a new birth. There's a new birth that happens, where your life force energy becomes uncaged and unhinged in a way that has never happened for your entire ancestral lineage. And it's because you allow the moment to be completed within you. You allowed all the experience to be completed within you. You didn't hang at the perimeter of your life, right? Why we can't complete things, you guys, is because of fear. We're afraid. We're afraid to feel too much. We're afraid to feel our pain. And when we're afraid to feel pain, that's because we suffer. Suffer is not living in perpetual pain. It's perpetually living in the resistance to pain. That's why we suffer. Disease and illness comes from stagnation of emotion. That's where depression comes from, because things are not moving, because we're living in suffering. We're living in the anticipated threat of our pain, of what will happen within us. There'll be a level of vulnerability that will come with us. Right now, what's trying to happen in the space, the reason we're being so confronted with death is because there's a real calibration and cleansing of the palate that's trying to happen. Imagine we're trying to water the soil so new flowers can be born and birthed through the earth. You guys get that? We're trying to move this energy through our body to put it back into the earth. It scatters like ashes back into the graves. And then what happens? It becomes fertilizer. It becomes new seeds to grow what's next. That's why death is very much a process of working with earth and moving things back into the earth to a cycle. And I just noticed this in my family, the resistance to pain, the level of pride, the level of inability to go to the heart of the emotion. And right now, our entire way that we orchestrate with the world is trying to move to a space that's more graceful, right? With all this pain that's happening, you guys have noticed all this unworthiness karma. What it's trying to do is can you transmute with the world in a deeper, more heartfelt, emotional, more authentic way? Or do you fight against it? Do you fight against that transmission that's trying to come within you? Because when you do that, not only will you begin to heal some of the deepest charges to your unworthiness, but you'll notice that you're going to begin to have this divinity that starts to come. There's going to be this radiance and this light that begins to break through this pain eventually. And this pain process lasts as long as it has to until we're ready. Think about the pain process. It's trying to create space. It's trying to create space. And it's going to go on as long as it has to until there's enough space for the sun and the light to shine. And then we begin to move into a different transmission, right? This is really what happens, you guys, is when we go through a crazy initiation in our life, what we're doing is we're going through a death experience. We're going through a death experience, and we all want the light. We all want the birth, but so few of us are really able to fully be in that season of death. And so what happens is we never really get to birth the divinity on the other side. We never really get to birth the light. We're not able to be through the full transmission of the death through our body to put the energy back into the earth. What you'll notice, guys, somatically, energetically, as you begin to release energy, like say you're releasing energy through your legs, right? Your legs are buzzing, you're releasing energy through your legs. That is the same thing as death. That is the same thing as like a transmission of death in your body. And when you do that, you're moving energy back into the earth. That's a clearing. But when energy begins to come up and energy begins to move up, this is more of a merging and an integration. As energy descending, it's a death. As energy begins to come up, it's more of the birth. So really, like cycles of energy in the body, somatically, we descend energy into the earth, and then it comes up as the birth. And what this is, and we don't really get to the energy coming up until we fully move through the transmission of the death and the grief. Our grief is our capacity to complete things. Our grief is our capacity to complete things. Think about why in our life we perpetually have the same cycles and patterns that continue to persist, and we're at a stalemate. We're stuck in stagnation. It's because there's a level of grief and death in the body that is needed so that we can finally break the cycle, so that the death experience can fully be consumed and confronted within us. Our own mortality of that identity, that mask, that way of being, that person, that relationship. This is why people in romantic relationships can't have completion conversations. They can't come back to love. They live in a pattern of their pain because they can't feel their pain, let it kill them, to come back to the start, a place of love, so that a new birth can come forward, so that a new iteration, a new flower can rise. So we never really complete it. And so our grief is our capacity to complete things. If you think about your relationship to grief and death, it's going to be about your capacity to complete things and come back to love, come back into accountability and ownership within yourself, come back into a space where you're ready to let your pain hurt you emotionally, but you're able to do so with a higher vibration of integrity. You're able to allow your pain to hurt you. You're able to allow your pain to rip you open, but you're able to do so with a God-like integrity. That I see the higher vision here, that I see the higher purpose here, and I'm not going to allow my pain to keep me stuck in a process where I perpetually hold on to these infected wounds. And so when you let the moment, when you complete it, when you go visit the sick and dying and say that I love you, I'll see you on the other side. When you do that, it breaks you. Life breaks you. But then what happens is there's a new childlike innocence that emerges. There's a new resting place in your nervous system. Fear moves out the ground. You're no longer afraid. You're confronting. You're completing. You're no longer afraid. And the energy comes into the soil. Maybe as their body and their spirit does move back into the earth, their flesh, as they move back into the earth, so does the energy through you. Something needed to be completed through you. Some confrontation of your own mortality that you were able to move through you. And you move it all through your body and it releases into the earth. And now the new day comes. Now the birth comes. You know, that moment after you allow that grief to move all the way through you, and then it bursts, and then it bursts on the side, and you can feel when it opens, you know, that feeling when you feel it begin to open, when everything becomes a little bit brighter. Not only does it become brighter, you guys, but you're not afraid. Your fear is at a different level. So much of this death and grief is fear related. What we really think about fear, I look at fear as often an inability to go to the heart of the emotion. We're afraid to feel the full depth of the emotion. So fear is involved in everything. If you think about when you're moving the deepest grief through your body, what doesn't allow us to get to the grief is fear. And so it becomes fear and grief together. It becomes fear and grief together. And when you allow the fear and the grief to move through you, maybe you shake. I noticed over the weekend I've had quite a bit of shaking as I've been moving this level of fear and grief through my body. And it's been this sort of gnarly death transmission. And I know there's this real death-like process and experience that is coming within me. And so now I know as I see death all around me, it's representing some spiritual death in the unconscious or subconscious within me. And it's asking us to complete things in our body. It's asking us to give us an opportunity to go back to the start. And this is what happens with so many people. They become confronted with these situations and they can't go to the heart. They can't go to the center of their pain. They have too much pride, too much shame, not enough courage, too much fear. And then it creates an infected wound that never really heals inside of them. Their energy stays stuck. Depression, disease, illness. Things go unsaid, regret forms. We don't have that completion conversation with that person we went on a journey with and we loved at one point in time. We can't confront our mortality. We can't move back into a space of humility. Right now, with everything that's moving through, when we're confronted with death and grief in the field, we're given this opportunity. Can you be graceful? Can you allow your pain to move through you and allow the new day to form within you? Can you complete something? Can you allow the completion to take place in your body so we can finally begin? So we can recalibrate and regain a large portion of our divinity that we lost, that got taken from us along the way, right? We leave the world so much similar to the ways that we enter it: helpless, vulnerable, fragile. These are the moments of grace, the moments of vulnerability. And these moments right now when we feel weak, when we feel vulnerable, when we feel like we're being exposed, when we feel like something is coming through us that we feel like we might not have a handle on, we might not have control of, that might be so big that it scares us. Be afraid. Be afraid. Like, go all the way with what you're experiencing. Have the hard conversations. Feel the really, really difficult emotions. Say the things that you want to say. We're at a real pivot, a real conjecture moment here where we're given this opportunity to complete a certain level of karma. And it's going to be about how we show up right now. It's going to be about the amount of grace that we can hold in the sea and the trenches and the tears of our pain. So most people hang around the perimeter like, I'm gonna dip a toe in. No, if you're going to grieve, I want you to wail. If you're going to grieve, I want you to yelp and I want you to wail from the fucking ancient time. Let it roll and let it rattle all through your fucking body. Let it break you open. As Hemingway said, we're either going to be killed or we're going to be broken. Let's hope that we get to be broken. Let's hope that this world breaks us, because when that breaks us becomes a moment for completion, a moment for remembrance and recalibration from what we lost. That's why these moments, the guys, that perpetually happen through life of death and grief, when death and grief come, it becomes a moment to begin again. It becomes a moment to start again, for our soul and our spirit to begin again in the remembrance of something that it always had the potential for. It always had the capacity for, but it wasn't able to access. Too much stuck energy, too much trauma, too many difficult emotions, not enough safety, not enough capacity in the body. So it becomes this opportunity for us to begin again. As Ram Dass said, it becomes an opportunity for grace, to allow this physical process to happen within us, to be graceful, to really allow ourselves to be graceful. But we have to fully complete what's happening. And you'll know, you guys, because energy is moving. The energy will be out your legs and out your feet back into the earth. You'll feel shit moving. And what's happening right now, you guys, is we keep getting hit. We keep getting hit over and over again because we're in a really big collective death right now. This is why death is all around us. There's people that, unfortunately, for whatever their soul's evolution, are not meant to come off of the soul's karmic timeline. People who pass on right now are not meant to move off the soul's karmic timeline, and it's their time to go for whatever reason, right? But this is where you're going to see a lot of karma just kind of poke its head at the surface and ask us, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? And again, this is what happens. I've mentioned in other videos, when the spirit realm and the human realm collide and converge with the acuteness and the potency that's happening right now. You guys, my teeth are so sensitive right now. That's how I know that I'm purging from my mouth. It means I'm moving a lot of fear. I'm moving a lot of fear. A lot of the teeth, the mouth associated with fear. But my whole face is trying to open. My crown's been trying to open fully since 2017. In 2017, I was bedridden. You know what's crazy? This is before I knew anything about this process. I had crazy levels of congestion, sinus congestion, where my head felt like it was so heavy. I had to sleep all the time. You know what was happening at the end of 2017? My body was accessing ancestral grief, but I didn't know what to do with it then. I didn't know what to, that's the beginning of my physical spiritual process. Was the end of 2017. I took antibiotics. I had to go on, like, the summer of 2017. I had to take a fuck ton of antibiotics, which fucked up my gut, created candida, created a whole bunch of parasites in my stomach, led to all this crazy congestion. And I knew at the time, I was like, oh, I'm being asked to grieve. Grief is trying to come up. But at the time, my body I had done zero nervous system work. I had done zero embodiment work. I'd done very little talk therapy. I knew my body didn't have the capacity to move this grief through that came up in 2017. And this was starting a process for me. It was like all this, whatever happened to my soul's evolution, that all this ancestral energy just sort of dropped into my head. Kind of like you're in a waiting room. You're in like an energetic waiting room. When your head gets really dense and you're really tired, it's like energy is in your head in an energetic waiting room, ready to kind of fly and funnel through the body. But it took years before that energy was able to move. But at the time, in the inception in 2017, I was like, I need to grieve, because I had such a poor relationship to grief. Grief terrified me. Grief terrified me. I was so afraid of it. I wasn't able to die. I wasn't able to complete things. The story in my life, you guys, at that point was Jamie can't complete things. And that was everywhere. Hard conversations. It was projects, businesses, creative ideas. I couldn't complete things. And I realized that was my relationship to grief. And not only did I have a hard relationship to grief, you guys, but all of a sudden I was having to deal with all the ancestral grief. All the grief my entire lineage wasn't able to feel was now being dropped into my fucking head. Not only did I struggle with my grief, I had the whole lineage's grief in my head. Motherfucker. I have to deal with everyone's shit. I got to clean up the mess. And I had this really hard time with grief. And I realized this was like an ancestral pattern. This fear to go to the heart of it led to certain sufferings in the lineage. What it ultimately led, you guys, is when you can't really grieve, you don't really get to joy. Grief is really what actually births joy. Grief When you really grieve, that's where you really get to move to the true innate joy in your spirit. So when that energy showed up in 2017, it led this very unwell physical illness process with me that I had to work through. But it also just dealt with this emotional and energetic process where I was being brought through this crazy transmission of death. Jamie, you're going to have to learn how to grieve. You're going to have to learn how to grieve, because for what you need to do for your iteration and your path and your soul's evolution here on spirit, and whatever you need to do to contribute to the world and to be of service, that you need to move all these ancestors' grief through. So there's a level of light and radiance in your spirit that you can move through to teach. And I wasn't even a teacher. I wasn't even a coach at that time, but I had been anointed and indoctrinated through what had arrived in my body. And I had to deal with all that grief of the ancestors. And you guys, when we think about grief and our pain, so much of it is unworthiness. Unworthiness is a very general form for our pain. Think about just at the heart of it. We don't do things. We don't experience joy because we don't feel worthy of it. We don't pursue that business because we don't feel worthy of it. You know, we live in scarcity money because we don't feel worthy to hold a lot of monetary abundance. And so it becomes everything. At the core of it is unworthiness. And so much of just what's shown up in the field right now is another really, really big portal between moving all this ancestral unworthiness through the body so that we can complete something. And when I say complete something, it's like open-ended karma in the body. Open-ended karma is basically stagnation. It's stuckness. Why we can't move in certain ways in our life is because of open-ended karma. And it wants to kind of fuse together, and when it fuses together, what that means is your conscious and your unconscious make a connection in the body. Oh, I get it. I understand it. That's karma completing. When your conscious mind and your unconscious body are like, oh, shit, I get this. I understand this. Karma's being completed. When karma completes, now a divine process begins. The energy descends back into the earth, the recalibration. That's why when we move ancestral energy, it's moving at our feet. It enters the crown. All this field up here, all this energy up here, how expansive is your energetic field? What do you think you're capable of doing? When you ask someone what they're capable of doing with their life, and they have this very, very pragmatic answer, and they're a lot of limiting beliefs, this area is so compressed, right? When you ask someone and they genuinely believe that they can fucking do anything, their field is really, really open. And that's going to be proportional to how much ancestral energies move through the body. And when the ancestral energy moves through the body, it's going to descend, and then there's going to be an ascension that takes place, like a boomerang effect, right? That happens where you move into the proportional level of life force energy, of joy. This is why right now, you guys, with all the death and grief, if we fully go to the completion, it's going to be a pretty profound experience of something new opening in our field, in our body, something, if we go to the heart of it right now, something unprecedented is going to show up, meaning your body is going to move into foreign territory. Your body and your spirit and the capacity of what you can hold inside of you is going to move into foreign territory if you fully allow this descent right now to happen. Right? It's a bridge. It's a bridge. You guys, death and grief is a bridge to birth, joy, and life, right? And really living a spiritual life is our capacity to confront our own mortality constantly throughout our life, to allow the confrontation to make us more graceful, more full of more humility, more heart-centered, more power, more feeling of our worthiness, to allow the recalibration of something we lost when we were young. An opening of innocence, right? An opening of purity. That's when you see someone who's really godlike. What they've done, if they've transmuted enough pain, and this is my real integrated version of it. You've transmuted enough pain to move back into your light. And everywhere that got in the way of you moving into your light, you've been able to move that density through your body to now feel enough space in your body to move into the light. This is why when we really integrate things, and you'll know something's integrating, guys, when you feel you just want to laugh, when you just want to play, when you feel like things feel bright or things feel really, really possible. What's happening is your body's now inching into like a new unprecedented territory. And what will happen at the end of this, your capacity will skyrocket. You'll even just think about your emotional capacity of what you can hold in your body. And it's full circle for me because going back to 2017, I had no relationship to grief. There were situations in past relationships where the women I was with that needed me to hold the fort of the emotion of grief, and I wasn't able to. I shifted into my little boy. I shifted into shutdown, and going through my initiation with the level of grief that I had to move through, like I'm able to like hold the fort like a warrior in grief. Because not only have I just grieved, I've grieved all the lineages grief. So much tear in that. And so my capacity is at a whole other level. And this is the reason why I'm constantly able to be born anew within myself. I'm constantly able to take what happens in my life, allow you open and surrender to the messiness of life, the imperfections, the mistakes that you make, the ways that you do things that are not of higher source, but you let the death of that happen and be born anew within yourself. And really that comes down to your capacity to grieve and to complete things. And so it's full circle for me now in this space because I see it in my lineage with what's happening personally in my family. I see people's capacity when they don't allow themselves, when they don't have the capacity to fully complete things, and they never really get to begin again. We never really get to begin again. That's what happens, you guys. We spend our whole lives trying to get back to the start, trying to get back to the vibration that we had at the beginning, or re-remember our innate divinity. We spend our whole lives trying to do that, but we don't feel safe enough. We don't have the capacity. We have too much fear. We don't have the courage. We have too much resentment, too much anger, too much fear, and we can't complete things. And things move, right? And so when we don't complete things, we stay stuck. We stay stagnant in some degree. The ancestral patterns and contracts and karmic contracts continue to persist and to exist within you because you don't complete it. This is why, oh, I'm not going to have a conversation with my brother who's passing on. I'm not going to go visit him. Now the ancestral karma persists and it persists and it persists and it's passed down to the next generation, tiptoeing around the perimeter, not allowing to go to the heart of it. This is why families continue to be repressed. This is why families never really get to move into joy. This is why we never really get to move into a space of true levity and ease. And I don't have to struggle for every inch, that I'm actually worthy just to draw things into my space and attract things into my space by my energy. This is how the ancestral patterns persist. And right now we have this moment with all of us. If we can just allow this ancestral contract inside of us, and right now it feels really uncomfortable, right? There's probably a lot of fear. There's probably a lot of grief. It feels like there's a lot of like death. Maybe it's some of your stuff, but a lot of it, you're like, this is like so big that I know. And that's how I know we're dealing with ancestral energy, because of how big it is. This is so big right now, and it's impacting so many people. If this was just your own shit, it wouldn't be everywhere. That's how I know we're dealing with collective energy and ancestral energy. And this is why, like, my head, my face, everything, it's just bombarded by so many ancestral contracts at once. And we're in a real death and grief process. Like, I've just really even been in the space of like, I wonder what it is like to die. Like, really thinking about that experience a lot more than I usually do, and thinking about that a lot, and being confronted just with the level of grief that exists at that level. And so, you know, dealing with the grief that exists at that level, we're dealing with such a massive death in the quantum field. In the quantum field, I connect to the collective field, the ancestral field, and past lives. And so we're dealing with all that up here, which is dropping down, you guys. And can we let it be graceful? Can we descend the energy? Can we water the soil, plant the seed, and allow the new flowers to be birthed? But it's all about how we complete this, how we allow things to be completed within our body. And that's what's happening right now. And that's really what's happening right now. we're in a real, I think there's orbs flying around. I think I have some orbs in my room. Either that's the sun or orbs for my crown. But that's what's happening right now, you guys. We're being asked to complete this death. And so you're probably going to notice, we upcoming US elections, and I'm not going to talk about that, but I just relate that at a level of karmic completion, right? That's why there was just a provincial election in here in BC in Canada as well. So that makes a lot of sense that those are happening in these bridge moments or these big transition moments. And so that's what we're dealing with, guys. And that's what happens with death and grief. We're constantly being confronted with our mortality. And we're asked to be graceful, be more humble. Can we relate more? Can we relate to others more vulnerable in a more heart-centered way? One thing I noticed is that there's a deepening in the emotional connections with a lot of my friends right now, a lot of my guy friends, or even opening up to me in more heart-centered, heart chakra ways, even guys that aren't in this space and don't do any of this work. I noticed there's just a deepening in certain relationships, while other relationships are completing and you're moving farther away. There's certain relationships, there's a deepening that's happening. And that's so much of just allowing the collective influx of this energy to move more into humility, to move more into gracefulness, where people are just being confronted with a level of pain that we're given no choice to either harden or be more tender. To either harden or be more tender. Because as our own mortality comes into question, as our own vulnerability, as our woundedness and our flawedness comes into view, we can either harden or we can just be tender, right? And reveal this process within us. And so that's what's happening, you guys. This is the revelation that's happening right now with this death and this grief. And there is a big deliverance on the other side of this. But right now, what it feels like is we keep getting little glimpses, and then another wave comes. Keep getting more glimpses, and another wave comes. So clearly, we're not out of this yet. We're not out of this space. And I think we'll be in this space as long as we have to for our particular process and what we're just being asked to just complete at this time. And you'll know that you're completing it, you guys, when energy is moving. When energy is moving in your body, you'll know that you're really, really in the process of completing it. So I'm going to leave this here, guys. This live, this channeled sermon. Look at that. 1:11 p.m. I'm always the one saying, stop looking for the spiritual meaning. And I include angel numbers to that. But it's fun sometimes, right? It's kind of that's kind of cool. Angel numbers, but it's when you guys, it's when people get way too hopped up on oh my God, angel numbers, my fucking dreams are coming. No, they're not, bitch. It's just a fucking angel number. It's just, I call it a little titty graze. It's God is kind of grazing on your tits when you see angel numbers. You know what I mean? But people want to be oh my God, I'm about to get fucked by God. It's no, it's just a titty graze. You saw triple ones, you just get a little titty graze, a little warm titty graze. Muffins coming out of the oven, baby. That's all it is. Okay, guys, I would love for you guys to like this video, to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, so I can give you that content ding dong. Share this with a friend, you guys. If there's someone who is tuning into some of the same things, some of the same topics, some of the same energetics that I talked about here, send it off to them and be like, hey, check this out. It might resonate. It might help you make more sense of your experience. Because we're going through it, but we're going to get through it. So I'm sending love to everybody. Hope everyone has a great week. Yeah, if you have any questions, anything, you guys, feel free. You can put them in the comment section of the replay of this video, or you can send me a question on Instagram. If there's a topic that you want me to discuss in one of these sermons, in one of these transmissions, feel free to go ahead and send me that topic. Apart from that, that's it, guys. Sending love to everybody. Hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you back here on Friday.